One of the directors that I used to follow, I used to read, she had like a little article that she would send out in a newsletter. And she talked about after one particular church program, there was a woman who was sobbing afterwards. And so they were talking to her, and she was a believer. And they said, what has you so emotional? And she said, the way Mary Magdalene looked at Jesus when he touched her face. A simple moment, not words, not a song, not a big production number, but Jesus touched the face of this actress, and the look on her face really ministered to this person.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Artists of the Way. I'm John, the host. Today, I'm joined by an old friend of mine, Jo-Ellen Ming, who I haven't seen in quite some time. But Jo-Ellen runs TrueJem Productions over in Holland, Michigan. Is it TrueJem that you've been doing for 25 years, or just in general working in the theater for 25 years?
Actually, I should have written over 30 years because I forgot to add TrueJem to that experience. But
Ah,
after 25 years doing what I was doing, then I formed TrueJem,
okay.
and TrueJem just turned 11 in
Wonderful.
February. Yep, this
That's
year.
awesome. And you
Yeah.
guys are
So
doing a production of Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat right now, right?
yes, we are. It is my favorite show of all time. I love, love, love that show.
That's awesome.
And so I'm excited about that one.
Cool. I'm excited to pick your brain about that one because I'm not a huge Joseph fan, but I know just from our interactions, like we come from similar places theologically and caring about our faith. So I'm intrigued to pick your brain there about that and see what you love that about that show. But we'll
Okay.
get to that in a little bit here. First, I always ask a couple questions of guests right at the start, just in relation to their art. So I kind of jumped ahead of this question, but what are the things that you're working on right now artistically?
Well, it's been a busy summer, just in general, because I'm looking at not retiring, but shifting my load a little bit. I've been
Mm,
really heavily into summer. So this year I took on more, kind of knew it was sort of my last hurrah.
yeah.
So I just finished a very young children's show called Green Goo, the Picky Eater Musical. It's about a little boy that does not want to try guacamole, and he calls it green goo because he doesn't know what it is. And
Sounds
then
like me.
sounds like a lot of people actually. Earlier this summer, so our June show was Jungle Book Kids. That was for some of the older, like middle school, early upper elementary, and then lower elementary was Green Goo, and then of course Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and then I teach a really small camp coming up. Was just like about 3 or 4 people. We have 2 sessions of it. American Girl Doll Camp, where people can bring their American Girl dolls, and we create a skit and just talk about theater things. And so that's my summer. So quite a few projects were going on this
Yeah.
year.
That's an awesome way to kind of build theater around. That's awesome.
Mhm.
How often do you do, because Joseph is an all ages cast, how often do you do all age shows?
The last time we did one was Guys and Dolls, and that was 5 years ago, way before
Wow.
COVID. I have mostly focused in the last couple of years on student theater.
Hmm.
And a lot of it has to do with I work at Avalon School of the Arts, and I teach
Hmm.
theater classes. And it's so exciting to work with that next generation
Yeah.
and watch them change and grow and mature and all the aha moments. It's not
Hmm.
that I don't like the all ages, I love the all ages, but to be perfectly frank, it's also a lot of resources, time, money,
Yeah.
energy. And so I find that the student productions just have worked better for me in the
Yeah.
last couple of years.
And there definitely is something, because I've done some of the youth stuff at Master Arts leading that, and there is something special about, I don't know, like the formation in that, and being able to take the time to be like, I'm not just directing, but we're gonna like zero in on you as a performer and as kind of a holistic person, and how can we help grow that? There is something really special about that.
One of the things that we really focus on, especially for the like the middle school to early high school kind of thing, we have team competitions, and we're really big
Mm.
into team. And that's something that's very important to me, as I instruct and coach and direct, is that we are a team.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a very spiritual concept for people to understand and learn, that it isn't just about me. And I think the greatest team ever is the Trinity.
Hmm.
You just look at Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and everyone knows their role and respects each other and understands
Hmm.
that there's not a hierarchy here.
Yeah.
This is a team effort. So that's a huge thing for me that I like to talk about, and also just life skill. How do you hang up your costume? I know that sounds silly, um, but I'm very picky about costumes get taken care of, props getting taken care of. We have also students who are student leaders who
Hmm.
come in and they lead the teams, but also our backstage people are all students, and they're all learning and understanding what it's like to take ownership of certain areas. And that's really exciting to me. I love seeing that happen.
Yeah, there is a crazy amount of life skills you can learn through theater, I think. Well, just for me, so much of my growth and development happened through community theater and high school theater, and like learning how to tackle those projects, learning basic things. I remember shocking one of the high school costumers because I knew how to fold my pants properly because I'd done it at community theater, and she was like, "Wow, you actually know how to hang up your pants." I was like, "I do."
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Yep.
My second question that I always ask is, how has God been using art in your life in this season?
I think some of what God shows me every time I'm doing a show is truly that it doesn't, I mean, I think hard work is important, and all your research and all of that. But at the end of the day, it's not about me, and it's not
Hmm.
just about, it's not by might, it's not by power, it's by my spirit.
Yeah.
I love Nehemiah just in general, because you just think about how God works through the situations.
Hmm.
And this summer has been just kind of interesting because if it could go wrong, it has. And we're starting to joke about it, the production team and my family and close friends. I'm like, I don't know if you want me around, because whenever someone, shows up, something sort of happens. And I think that's God's gentle reminder to me, that I really do need to rely on Him,
Mm.
and not just to rely on my own strength, but also to know my limits and to know, okay, what's important. And sometimes, John, I need to, because I'm a perfectionist and a control freak. I mean,
Hmm.
I've directed you, you know that about me.
Yep.
And just to learn to let things go.
Yep.
And so the last couple of years, I've started to sort of use an analogy. Well, that's a cherry on the top of the sundae. If the cherry
Mm.
doesn't get put on top of the sundae still is great. And so understanding, my family, my friends, my health, how I treat my cast, how I treat my helpers might be more important than having the perfect color on Pharaoh's throne.
Yep.
That paint color isn't available. Let's not freak out. So that he's been growing me the last, like, actually maybe 2 years, because I can get pretty crabby when things don't go my way, and I'm really trying to work on that, and also to listen um to people that I trust.
Mm.
He puts people in my life, and family, friends, co-production people, to really listen and let them speak truth into my life, and not to say, oh, well, I'm the director and I know and blah blah blah. But um, I'm 65. I just turned 65 a couple days ago, and
Hmm.
I'm not done learning.
Yeah.
I never thought when I was in my 30s that I would be able to say that. But God works on us and teaches us, and until we go to live with Him,
Yeah.
and then I think we're going to learn a whole new new thing. But
Learn in a whole different way.
learn a
Yeah.
whole different way. But while we're here, I also think that while we're here on Earth, that this is something really special, because he gave us this life. What can we learn? What can we do? This in and of itself is holy.
Hmm.
And yes, I know getting to heaven, and there's something beyond, but that doesn't negate the importance of what we're doing here now.
Yeah.
And to just try to take that seriously, and yeah, learn all we can, grasp it, go for the best, but also know When is it time to dial back a little bit? When is it time to say, it's okay? It's okay.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of cool crossovers with all those things you were talking about and theater as an art form. It's so collaborative, which is something I love about it. That like
Yeah.
like you can't just power through and do like your thing. Like you've got to work with somebody else, even if it's just an actor. Even if you have no set or lights or anything, you've got to at least work with an actor or with somebody there to help. And like that temporary piece too. Like there's so many beautiful things that matter in the moment with the theater and with the play that you've produced, and then in 2 weekends it gets destroyed and you'll never
It's
see it
gone.
again. It's
Hmm.
gone. But it was beautiful in that moment. Yeah, that's really cool. So before we jump to Joseph, I wanted to ask a little bit more just about your story as far as what got you into theater in the first place. What made you want to pursue that artistically? What made you passionate about it?
Well, I was just a typical kid who loved playing with, Barbie dolls. The Barbie movie's out. I do want to see it. I haven't seen it yet.
Yep.
But, playing with my dolls and my stuffed animals and stuff and pretending to put on programs. For some reason, I always like to interview my animals. And back then, cassette tape recorders were kind of big. So you had a little microphone and then I would
Hmm.
try to do voices for them. And my poor cat and my dog, I tried to dress them up and do all of that. So I was always interested in that,
Hmm.
and from a very early age. But I also was interested in attending plays. I loved going to the theater, and I think I was about 7 or 8 when my aunt and uncle took me to a local high school production. I believe it was right at Holland High School here in Holland. And it was like Broadway to me, I mean, I
Hmm.
just thought it was like, wow. And so it was just always something intriguing. And then when I got into high school, I got involved a little bit. I wasn't a total theater, geek,
Hmm.
but I did a few things in theater. And but mostly, it was just sort of an amateur side love. And then as I got older, got into community theater. And then sort of a thing started happening in the church, and drama came into the church. Remember years ago talking to Pris McDonald, who was the founder of Master Arts,
Hmm.
and she said drama is a big recyclable art in the church. It just sort of shows up every so often and fades out, and it comes back in a new form.
Hmm.
And so I would say about 25, 30 years ago that everyone was doing skits in church.
Yep.
I sort of got involved there, and then I got involved in church ministry and creative arts, and then the two kind of gelled. And the church I was at liked to do large productions as
Mm.
evangelism events, and I was like, maybe I'd like to do this as a career, but I didn't know if that would work. But about, yeah, 11 years ago, God just sort of opened up the door, and I
Hmm.
started TrueJem Productions. Of course, at the time, I didn't know what it would become.
Yeah.
And it's that's the other thing is just trust God. You have the dream, like Joseph had the dream. He didn't know what
Hmm.
that meant,
Hmm.
what the sheaves of corn and all of that meant. And you can have an idea, but God can take you totally down another path. So just
Yep.
interesting what he's done with the business, because it's not necessarily where I thought it was going to end up. But the journey's been terrific. He's so much smarter than I am.
Yeah.
And it's been a great ride. It's not easy. Certainly has been some difficult moments.
Hmm.
But again, just what you can learn, and the people, John, the people. I have been blessed incredibly with the people that have come into my life and that I have worked with. It's really, really something to be grateful and thankful for. So I'm very glad that he led me down the true gem path.
Mm.
And I don't know what's for the future. I do know that he's calling me into a season of a little more resting. Not, like I said,
Yep.
not a complete retirement, but pulling back a little bit. And so I'm anxious to see which fork in the road that he's taking me down.
I know. I was just talking to my wife about that last night, and just the life I'm living now is not at all the life that I thought would live when I was in high school. Like I would never have called this. Um, but it is crazy and beautiful how he directs it just to something that is so much better than we could ask or imagine. Um, and it just
Exactly.
is if you just take that step and trust. That is really beautiful and awesome. Cool. Well, let's chat about Joseph because that opens. It'll open the week after we post this. For everybody listening, it opens next week. But for us, it's like what, 3 or 4 weeks away now.
We're about at 2.5. Yeah.
Okay, you're
Yeah, we
you're right
opened,
up to
yeah.
crunch time.
We are in crunch time. Yes, we are definitely in crunch time. But that's the other thing, as you know. Um, well, I want to say two things about that. Number one,
Hmm.
another life skill that theater teaches you is how to manage stress, right? Yeah, you have to manage stress. But number
Hmm.
two, after you've done enough shows, you recognize, okay, crunch time is crunch time. It just is.
Yep.
And you can either freak out or say, hey, it always comes together. I just have to do whatever I can do to make it happen. But the
Yep.
more I go crazy, I'm going to get sick. I'm going to get stressed. I have to
Hmm.
manage it. So yeah, it's crunch time. We open August 16, and
Hmm.
we are performing in a venue I absolutely adore, because it's just a cool venue. And Joseph is a show that doesn't have to be in a typical theater space. So it's a
Hmm.
church called Victory Point Ministries, and I kind of became acquainted with them a number of years ago when we did Aladdin Jr. there, and they're great to
Hmm.
work with. And like I said, the space is just kind of cool, to stage things in. I
Yep.
love unconventional spaces.
Hmm.
I love big productions on a proscenium stage as well.
Hmm.
But most of what TrueJem has done is more immersion theater where the actors come into the audience and we don't have large sets.
Yeah.
Everything is very minimalist, and it's much more about that actor getting up close and personal
Hmm.
with the audience. And so the space is really nice for that.
And there's something about that like restriction and the unconventions that just forces you to get creative. I feel
Uh-huh.
like it just gets your brain going to do something unique and cool.
Yep. I still remember we did Cotton Patch Gospel at Master Arts, and you played Jesus. And
Hmm.
I said, I want you to walk all the way up that aisle, all the way. You
Oh,
said,
that was
really?
awesome.
All the way up to the lighting booth. And you were quite young then. I said, yep.
Yep.
And you'd be like, they're going to be right there. I'm like, yep, they're going to be right there. So I really enjoy that.
I still remember. I don't know if I ever told you this story. This is a sidetrack. Now I'm going to tell a story. My favorite moment of that like unconventional and kind of immersion stuff with the audience. Um, there was a moment where, because I talk with my hands so much, and I was singing the "Love the Lord Your God with all your heart, soul, and mind" bit, um, and I was talking with my hands, and I like just kind of gestured, and this little old woman just looked up and had like tears welling up in her eyes and grabbed my hand.
Oh,
I know,
I,
and I had two reactions. I was like, one, this is the most awkward thing that's ever happened to me on stage in my life. But two, I was like, wow, I'm like a conduit for whatever this woman has going on between her and God right now. And that was just remarkable the way that the small intimacy of that space made the
yeah,
audience feel comfortable enough to do that was mind blowing to me.
yeah, really a holy moment, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah, I know I didn't know that story. The directors that I used to follow, and I'm very embarrassed to say I don't remember the name, but they wrote they wrote a lot of dramas and stuff back, like I said, back in the drama days. So that it's like
Hmm.
20 years ago. But I used to read, she had like a little article that she would send out in a newsletter, and she talked about after one particular church program, there was a woman who was sobbing afterwards. And so they were talking to her, and she was a believer. And they said, what it has you so emotional? And she said the way Mary Magdalene looked at Jesus when he touched her face.
Hmm.
A simple moment, not words, not a song, not a big production number, but Jesus touched the face of this actress, and the look on her face really
Yeah.
ministered to this person. Um, Theater moments are so powerful, and you can't plan for those.
That's one of the beautiful things about the calling of an artist is we're just called to reflect what our experience of God in the world, and then we all we really can do is offer that up to him and just trust him to do what he wants. And a lot of times we will never know what that it does. It's just a mystery, but somehow God is present in that and works through that. And
I
that's,
agree.
yeah, it's beautiful. Do you have a moment from a show where you feel like, because I've definitely had shows where I've just been like, man, God is present so intensely in this show. Have you ever had a project where you've just felt like, man, the spirit is here and carrying me through and really working?
Well, um, a number of years ago, I was a co-director in Jesus Christ Superstar,
Hmm.
and there's always the conflict about the resurrection, right?
Hmm.
And so the co-director and I were like, okay, we want to honor the piece, the way the piece
Hmm.
is written, because that's honor the work.
Yeah.
We don't rewrite things. We don't, yeah, we want to, as Christians, we want to obey the laws and the copyrights and all of that.
Yeah.
But what could we do? We staged the curtain call in such a way that it was the resurrection.
Hmm.
And the moment the audience just got it, and just the energy and the feeling in the room was really just, oh my goodness, um and so that was just for me a total moment. Another moment was when we did Fiddler on the Roof and the song Anna Tevka as they're
Mm.
leaving, and just the feeling of they knew that God would take care of them, but also the struggle.
Hmm.
And I feel like, we all have struggles in our lives. And I just felt in that moment, the way the cast handled that song, that anyone that was there could relate. It wasn't just, I'm not watching a story, but I have tough things in my life too. And um, people often would comment after the show about how that number spoke to them. So those are just two examples, but I think every show has a moment like that, or maybe a couple of them, but those are two that specifically I remember.
Hey, friends, I hope you're enjoying today's episode. I just wanted to pause for a moment and let you guys know that if you want to stay up to date on everything that Artists of the Way is doing, the best way you can do that is by signing up for our email newsletter through our website. That newsletter is going to go out every 2 weeks with the podcast. It'll let you know when episodes are posted. It's going to give you some thoughts that I've been having over the last couple weeks on theology or art or whatever God's working on me on. And it's also going to be the best way for you to get updates on what Artists of the Way is doing. We have some really exciting things in the works outside of just the podcast. God's been doing some really cool things, and I am super stoked for what they're going to be, but I can't share them just yet. But if you want to be among the first to find out what Artists of the Way is doing in the next year, sign up for that email newsletter. Visit our website at www.artistsoftheway.com. Scroll down to the bottom of our homepage. You can sign up for the newsletter there. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of the show. All right. I'd love to shift gears now and chat a little bit about Joseph. Because again, I think Joseph is fun. But just the way they approach the story isn't necessarily my favorite. But I'm curious from your perspective, if it's your favorite show. Now I feel like I'm coming at this like a debate, which is not my intent. What is it that you love about the show and makes the show special to you?
Well, first of all, it is a little silly version of it, and it's certainly a secularized version.
Mm-hmm.
But all truth is God's truth.
Mm.
And I feel that humor and fun are very disarming.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that the story about the brothers and the change that they go through, I feel is powerful. I think Andrew
Mm-hmm.
Lloyd Webber caught that aspect of the brothers knowing that they had to change, and they did the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And I think all of us as humans have been through a situation like that where we sinned, but we're hoping we're not going to get found out, or
Mm-hmm.
we could justify why we did it or whatever. But at some point, you come to that absolute moment of confession and I was wrong. And it's the ultimate story of forgiveness. I mean,
Mm.
you look at, Joseph and, the fact that he chose to forgive, he certainly didn't need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
In the original, I believe it's in the original Broadway production too. There's kind of an interesting little motif that shows up. And that is at the very end when Jacob comes to Egypt and Joseph comes to meet him in his chariot of gold. In the score, you hear Jesus Christ Superstar.
Hmm.
Da da da, the horns. Da da da. And I love it that Joseph is, sort of a harbinger of the Messiah to come. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that was interesting that Andrew Lloyd Webber put that in the score. Now, I noticed that it hasn't always made it into some of the other scores because I don't always hear it played.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hoping that we can find a way for our trumpet player to fit that in.
Yeah.
But the story itself of Joseph, um, I think is just such one of those beautiful Old Testament stories. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would agree with you. There's places where there's liberties taken with a story. But I also feel that people might go back and read it, you
Mm-hmm.
know? In
Yeah.
fact, I'm going to encourage, my director's letter, I'm going to encourage them, go back and read it. And something I always, it's just been a tradition with me. I always put conversation starters in my programs.
Hmm.
So after a show, people can go out for coffee or if they, talking to their friend even during intermission. And so we have
Yeah.
questions. And so one of the questions is, how much did they sell Joseph for?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't come up in the musical.
Hmm.
So the answer is found in the Bible. It's 20
Mm-hmm.
shekels of silver. So that'd be a conversation starter. How many things are, biblically totally accurate in the story. And
Yeah.
so like I said, I think all truth is God's truth. And it gives you a chance to explore the story and think about, hey, why is this story in there? Why is that story in the Bible?
Yeah.
It's a powerful story.
It really is. And I'm really excited to see your take on it. And I saw HPA's take on it right before COVID, which was directed by Brad Garnott, who's another man of God who's fantastic. And so it does always excite me when people that I know and I know where their faith comes from and how strong it is want to tackle a show that can be maybe a little more controversial to some people.
Mhm.
I, for example, love Godspell, and would love to direct that someday. But I know that's a really controversial one. But I can understand that viewpoint of you can see the truth of God that's in there and the worth of that, and God in His grace still brings that through. So
Mhm.
I'm definitely excited. Shay and I are definitely gonna come check that one out, and I'm excited. Is there an element of the production so far as you've been building it that you're getting the most excited about?
I think just the singing itself, the music
Mm.
is so fun.
Mm-hmm.
And the cast is, we have a cast of very accomplished singers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just love listening. I mean, because there's very little dialogue, like there's maybe five actually spoken sentences in the whole show. So
Mm-hmm.
we have a wonderful music director. The person also playing the part of Joseph is the student ensemble director. So he's
Hmm.
like the children's director.
That's
And
cool.
then so Rusty Gallus is playing Joseph. And then Holly Israels is our music director, and she's directed the show before and just is doing wonderful things with her vocals. John Ozing is my assistant director, and he's also my pit conductor.
Mm.
And because he's an accomplished musician himself,
Mm-hmm.
that team of Rusty, John, and Holly, they're always rehearsals. I'm like, leave me out of it. Once in a while they'll ask something, I'll say, okay, I want it this way. But when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to the musicality and everything of it, those three they're just all over it. And
Mm-hmm.
all of our actors, anyone with solos, etc., is really good. There is a spot in the show where it's called Poor Poor Joseph, and it can be sung by a camel, it can be silly, blah blah blah, but it's just kind of a little extra solo in there. And I'm actually having Reuben, the oldest brother, sing it because
Mm,
biblically he's the one that he went off and
mhm.
he didn't want them to kill Joseph, and he had second
Yep.
thoughts and came back, but it was too late. And
Mm,
so he does this longing thing where he calls kind of after Joseph, after the Ishmaelites leave. And then his father's chair, which Jacob sits in, Reuben also kind of takes the chair off as if,
mm,
like, oh, look what I've done to my dad.
mhm.
So, some people will notice that stuff. Other people might not notice it. But I am trying to put little pieces in there that harken to, the actual Bible story. So,
Yeah.
and I think I like the butler and baker. I know that's funny, but it was funny when I was little listening to those stories in Sunday school.
Hmm.
I grew up on flannel graphs. I'm really showing my age here.
I had some of those when I was a kid too. They were still around a little bit.
I just was mesmerized. Oh, we're having flannel graphs today.
I
That
know.
was so, it was so exciting. And so watching the birds and the, butler and baker, I still remember that. And they put the little
Mhm.
basket of bread on the flannel graph. And so, those Bible stories, they're entertaining. And then you look at in the New Testament, Jesus came in and continued to tell stories.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's story. Joseph, the biggie for me, John, is story.
Mhm.
And it's a great story.
Yeah. I'm really excited to check it out. And I mean, you have a fantastic cast from everything that I've seen. I've been hearing great things from Tim. So we're really excited to check it out. I have one more question before I ask my very last question here. I'm curious from a director's standpoint. What's unique, do you think, about the way that your faith in God intersects with the role of a director as they guide the vision of the show, as they work with so many people that come in and out of different shows and often have a lot of different things and different emotions going on depending on the show? Is there a way that you feel like your faith or relationship with God intersects uniquely in that way with you as the director leading this show and working with all these people?
I frequently have to remind myself, because let's face it, we get frustrated, that everyone is fearfully and wonderfully made.
Mm,
That doesn't mean that there aren't times when, relationship struggles happen. Sometimes you have to part ways.
hmm.
Sometimes you have to take a person aside. Sometimes I have to be taken aside. But really, no one gets up in the morning intentionally trying to cause trouble. I don't believe that. I just don't.
Hmm.
But we all have a sinful nature, and so I just try to see people, the way God created them. I don't want to pat myself on the back and say that I succeed all the time. I
Right.
don't. Also, I believe it's really important to have a line in the sand. Okay,
Mm,
so you were saying that maybe Joseph's not your most favorite show. Maybe you would never direct it. There
hmm.
are things that I will not do.
Hmm.
And so, um, like for example, profanity. There's certain things I will allow in a show. There are other things I can't direct that show because
Hmm.
of profanity or some other thing in there because I have to know what my line in the sand is.
Yeah.
So it also, I feel that it's important to bring out the truth of a piece. And like I said before, to honor the piece and the story itself. Because even
Hmm.
if it's not a biblical story, all true, again, to me, it's really important that all truth is God's truth. So where's the truth in this?
Hmm.
What is the thing and what is the holy moment? How can I facilitate that happening? Over the years, I've become much less controlling with my actors. I used to like say, do this hand gesture. You got to do it this way. I also
Hmm.
feel that I learned to trust people more
Hmm.
and the people that God puts in my path and try to trust and bring out the best in them as opposed to like, oh, I'm modeling the clay and you have to do it exactly like this. No,
Hmm.
I want you to kind of inform what we're doing and the production team too. What do you think? What do
Yeah.
you think about this? And, sometimes they tell me, I don't like what you're doing there at all. And so then I have to think about, well, why am I doing it?
Hmm.
And sometimes I stick with it. A lot of times change my mind. And because wise counsel, really helps. So I guess that just coming to it at a, as a person of faith, but definitely I would say, John, probably the biggest is there's just some pieces I will not do.
Yeah. And I totally get that. I remember there's Lowell Arts is doing The Whale, which is the play that the recent Brendan Fraser movie was based on,
Mhm.
which my wife and I went and saw and was like an amazingly directed and amazingly performed piece and had a lot of true, real moments in it. I was like, man, I would love to tackle a lot of those, like the subjects that are broached in that play, but just the way that it's handled, I'm like, man, I don't know if I feel the Holy Spirit like giving me a complete okay with that. I
Mhm.
think there's some times where like even if it's something you love, you might not be able to 100% be like, because we as believers, everything that we do is also a testimony to Christ. Um, so yeah, we definitely have to think through how is what I'm doing artistically reflecting back on Christ? Is that reflecting in a good way or in a bad way? And what does that do to my testimony? And I think sometimes that line can be blurry, but knowing where you can put it is definitely
Right.
helpful. Yeah,
And I don't want to tell someone where their line should be.
right. Yeah.
That's between them and God. And, I just have to know where mine is.
Yeah, I definitely think because I know my line is different from my wife's line is different from my brother's line is different from Tim's line. Like
Mhm.
there's a different layer that we all feel comfortable approaching,
Right.
but we just have to trust our own relationship with God to tell us what He's okay with us being involved in and
Mhm.
putting our work into. Yeah,
Right.
awesome. Um, this has been a great conversation. I'm going to start to wrap it to a close. I do have one more question. So I know for me growing up, I was always chomping at the bit for more resources as far as the artistic disciplines that I was wanting to try out, but then also that intersection between faith and art. And I think that's just a constantly evolving and growing thing to learn about is how do these two things intersect. What are some resources you might recommend people to check out who maybe are either interested in theater or art in general or interested in thinking through the intersection of those two?
Before I answer, I just have to tell you, in case when you're editing, you see a cat paw touch me on the shoulder. My cat decided to come into the room. Sorry about that.
That's
So
okay.
she's sitting next to me. Anyway, so there's a book. It's old. I'll admit it's old. But Rory Noland is the author, and he wrote The Heart of the Artist. And it
Okay.
was written for a mega church, which is sort of since kind of gone, downhill. And so I'm not even going to mention the church, but it was more about a church artist. So people in the band and the drama ministry, singers. But I think it applies to any Christian who's in the arts. And it's probably one of the best books I've ever read. And I go back to it every so often. And the one thing that I always remember is he talks about excellence versus perfectionism. And that's one of them. And also envy is in there, and I just love the book. It's also
Yeah.
got discussion questions in it, so that people you can think about it. You could journal with it. It is available on Amazon because before the podcast a couple days ago, when I thought I better check and see if this is still in print, and I
Yep.
think it's not just in print, but I think you can get it yeah, get it like Kindle or whatever. And but anyway, I've never found a better book personally, and it's a
Awesome.
quick read, easy read. um and then I think there's just a lot of resources out there. I think part of it is do the hard work. So it isn't a Christian resource, but it's I would recommend that you just read things about your craft, because God calls us not just to have art, not just to be artists, but to be the best artists.
Yep.
So when Jesus turned water into wine, it wasn't just wine, it was the best wine.
Yep.
And so I think the secular resources that are out there are great. And then I think if you're in the word, find find a devotional. I finally got to the point in my life where I realized I'm not going to sit and read something an hour or two a day. And so I have two devotional things that are sent to me every day on my computer, or I can
Mm.
get it to me on my phone because it's there and I have to deal with it. And
Yep.
one is I get a verse every day. Bible Gateway sends a verse every day. And then I subscribe to a C.S. Lewis devotional
Mm.
because I think just C.S. Lewis is powerful. And so if you
Hmm.
have that in your life, I think it helps to go to a Bible study and all that other stuff too. But I think you just got to have something that's at least present,
Hmm.
especially when you're involved in a show and you're super, super busy. Um, don't give up that word every day, even if it's one verse. I
Hmm.
just encourage you to read that one verse a day, and maybe, something else. Sorry, I keep looking at my cat. um,
That's
but
okay.
but anyway, and then I think you should just read creative stuff like C.S. Lewis and
Hmm.
even Harry Potter stuff because it's so well written and it helps you understand how important it is to help an audience or a reader imagine things.
Yeah.
Speaking of Harry Potter, I'm not going to quote it exactly because it's a whole paragraph, but J.K.
Hmm.
Rowling talks about the art of backstory. And
Mm.
I think that is a thing that all actors really need to work on. Whether you find a book to help you with that or resources to help you with it, you really don't need it because there's some standard questions like, how am I the same as my character? How am I different? I mean,
Yeah.
Google nowadays is at our fingertips.
Hmm.
Do that hard work, that research. She said that Sirius Black really doesn't have a lot of page time in her books.
Hmm.
You think of him as being a bigger than life character, but
Hmm.
really, if you look at how much she wrote about Sirius Black and how many quote unquote scenes he's in, is not that much. But she claims she has an entire backstory, and she said it would fill an encyclopedia if she published it.
Yeah.
Well, encyclopedia again, showing my age, and she's showing her age. Some people are like, "What's that?" Pre Google, but it's a book
Hmm.
about 2 to 3 inches thick. So
Yep.
she's saying, I have a whole file on Sirius Black. Why? The readers don't need to know everything in that book. But she said, I do, because I am the one moving the characters across the page. And I tell
Hmm.
my actors, you're the one moving the character across the stage.
Yeah.
So you better have a backstory because it will show up.
Hmm.
Even if you're in the chorus and have no lines,
Yep.
if you have a backstory and you know why you're there and you're in that scene, the audience, it'll come through. I promise you, the audience is going to find you far more believable and the whole show will be better. And
Yeah.
so I would say whatever resources you can find to help you do that hard work and develop that character. And then there's wonderful things written about like even gestures and, because it's not just your backstory, but how does your whole
Hmm.
body I would
Yeah.
I would read up a lot on that kind of stuff, especially certain characters. If you're portraying someone, certainly if you're portraying C.S. Lewis, for example, in
Hmm.
a show, um, or the beams are creaking. What's the name of that show?
Bonhoeffer. Yeah. Beams are creaking.
Yeah,
Hmm.
you better study up on who that person was.
Hmm. Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
so that
That's
would be
awesome.
my encouragement. But yeah, Heart of the Artist,
Cool.
he nails everything. I mean, I'm like busted every time I read it. Like,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I got to work on that. And then you give scripture and it's just a good read and a quick read, easy read.
That's cool. I haven't heard of that one before, so I will have to check that out as well. If you guys want to check that out with me, that'll be posted on our resources page on our website as well. Jo-Ellen, thanks for coming on. It's been really awesome to talk with you, reconnect some. I'm excited to see you at Joseph. It'll be great.
Yes. And I'm excited for what you're doing, John. It's been fun to watch. That's one thing I love about Facebook. I mean, you can say negative things about it, but I can keep up with what you're
Hmm.
doing. And this whole podcast thing is great. Thank you for asking me to be part of it. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it. It's been a joy just to talk to you again.
Yeah.
Yep. And good luck with all your endeavors. And certainly we'll be praying for you as you
Thank
go
you.
forward.
Thank you. Appreciate that. If you guys are enjoying the podcast as much as Jo-Ellen is, like it, subscribe, share it with your friends. That really does help. If you guys have thoughts about anything Jo-Ellen and I have talked about or previous episodes have talked about, leave your thoughts in the comments. I would love to read them and engage with you guys in that. We just pray that God blesses you all as you continue to walk through your relationship with Christ and continue to figure out that middle ground of worshiping Him, honoring Him, and being an artist. God bless.